Hi everyone. In this video we are going to see how can we set up the pipelines for our API management. But before we get started, I want to walk you through this diagram, which is summarizing what we are going to do in the next few videos. First of all, we have here our API management instances. And this represents different environments. Like we are going to have 3 API management instances. One for dev, one for QA, and one for prod. Then we are going to build some pipelines in Azure DevOps. So the extractor pipeline is going to pull API definitions, policy information, and diagnostic settings, etc. from dev instance of our API management. Then having all of this information placed in a Git repo, the extractor pipeline is going to create a PR for us. Once been reviewed and approved, it's going to be merged to the main branch, which is going to kick off the publisher pipeline, which is going to deploy this change into the QA environment of our API management, and so on for the prod environment. This is at a very high level what we will be doing in the next few videos. But before we get into the implementation, let's talk a little bit more about APIOps concept, from where it came from. APIOps is a similar concept like GitOps or DevOps, where you are combining 2 practices together or 2 methodologies together. And the way APIOps is working is going to place the API management infrastructure definitions under version control. So when you make changes to your API management instance, these changes are going to be extracted as code to be reviewed and audited. And once been approved, it's going to be deployed to the higher environments like QA and prod. Now let's get started and let's create our API management instances that we are going to use in the APIOps. Now, let's get back to Azure portal, and I'm going to create 3 API management instances. I'm gonna create a new resource group. I'm gonna call it RG CI/CD dev. And I'm going to put my API management in Australia East region, and resource name is going to be APIM CI/CD dev. And then I'm gonna put my organization name and my email address. As you can see here, the name is not unique, so I'm gonna put my initials at the end, and it should be fine. Now, let's go ahead and create our API management for dev environment. Let's go ahead and create it. Now, let's go ahead and create 2 other API management instances. Be aware of the cost here, guys. As you already know, each API management instance is going to cost you around $70 a month. And I'm now creating 3 for this section. So if you are not prepared to pay for this amount, just don't create these instances for CI/CD pipelines. Having said that, I'm not going to leave these 3 instances for a month, but just wanted to call it out. Now let's go ahead and create another API management instance for our QA environment. Let's create a new resource group. Let's call it RG CI/CD QA. And let's put it in Australia East region. And the resource name is going to be APIM CI/CD QA, and my initials at the end. Now the organization name is gonna be none. Then I'm gonna put my email address. And let's go ahead and create our second instance, our QA instance. Now let's go ahead and create our prod instance. Let's create a new resource group. Let's call it RG CI/CD prod. And let's put our prod instance in Australia East region. and let's call our API management in prod APIM CI/CD prod, and then my initials at the end. The org name is gonna be none. Then I'm gonna put my email address. Now let's go ahead and create the prod instance. And as you already know from previous videos, it's going to take around 30 to 45 minutes for these 3 instances to be ready. So what I'm going to do now is to go to Azure DevOps and set up our repos and pipelines until our API management instance are ready for us. So I'm going to open a new tab and go to Azure DevOps. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new organization. I'm going to call my DevOps org Hussein Awad APIM course. And I'm going to host it in Australia East region. And let's go ahead with that. Alright, I'm gonna create a new project and I'm gonna call it APIM. And I'm gonna keep it private project. Let's go ahead and create our project. Now, let's get back to the documentation. There is a GitHub repo for the APIOps solution. And if you click on that, you should be able to see different tools, YAML files that we will be using when we build our pipelines in Azure DevOps. So what I'm gonna do now is to go to tags and go to version 4.1.3, which is the latest version. Now, I want you to go ahead and download Azure DevOps.zip. All right. And let's extract this folder and see what's inside. As you can see here, there is a tools folder, pipelines, and there is 3 YAML files. These YAML files are going to be used for extractor pipeline and publisher pipeline, which are these 2 pipelines that we are going to build. Now, let's go back to our Azure DevOps and let's go to repo and initialize our APIM repo, of course. Now, let's go ahead and create a new folder for tools, then pipelines. And I'm gonna add README file. And let's go ahead and create these folders. And let's commit this change. Now, in pipelines folder, I'm going to upload these 3 YAML files that we have just downloaded. Extractor, publisher with environment. Let's go ahead and upload these 3 files. Now, I want you to go ahead and create 2 more YAML files. And if you go to the GitHub repo here, if we get back to APIOps, you should be able to see at the bottom here, configuration.prod.yaml. So we are going to create 2 more files at the root here. The first file is going to be the prod file, configuration.prod.yaml. And let's commit this change. And the second file is going to be configuration.qa.yaml. Simply, these 2 configuration files we have just created, we are going to specify certain configuration that are specific for different environments, as we are going to see in more details later. And if you head back to the GitHub repo and click on the configuration.prod.yaml, which is a sample file that we will need to put in our configuration file. So I'm going to copy this over to configuration.qa.yaml. Let's edit this file first. And actually, I'm going to clean everything up, just leaving the main tags, which are APIs, backends, diagnostics, loggers, and the named values. Gonna just keep it very simple. But in here, I'm going to put the API management instance name for my environment. And since I am in configuration.qa.yaml, I'm going to put the API management instance for QA environment. So let's go ahead and copy the name of our QA API management. Let's go back and put it in our configuration.qa.yaml file. And let's commit this change. And let's copy this file and paste it in configuration.prod.yaml. However, I need to change the API name to be the name of my prod instance. So let's copy the name of my prod API management and paste it in configuration.prod.yaml. Don't worry about these files for now. We are going to cover it in much more details later. And let's commit this change. Now, what we need to do is to create a service connection. So let's head to the project settings. And let's go to service connections. And let's create a new service connection. And let's make our connection type to be Azure Resource Manager. And let's use service principal. And let's go to the next step. And let's choose the subscription where you have your API management instance created. And let's select the dev resource group that we have created. And let's call the service connection APIM connection. And let's check on this checkbox to grant access to all pipelines. And let's go ahead and save our service connection. All right, now let's go back to pipelines environments. And I'm going to create two environments, one for QA, and I'm going to add myself as the approver in this environment. And let's add a prod environment as well. And I'm going to add myself as approver of this environment. All right, now let's go to library and let's create a variable group. But this variable group has to be in a specific name. And to know what it is, let's head back to our repo and see how we should be calling this variable group. If you expand on tools, pipelines, and extractor, you should be able to see under variables section here the group name that we should be using in the library. If you want to change it, you need to change it here first in the run extractor.yaml file. And whatever you are going to put in the extractor file, you should be using in the variable group. So I'm going to keep it the same, API-automation. Let's copy it over to our variable group. Now we need to add some variables in our group. And if we are going to head back to the repo documentation, and I'm going to put this link in the resources of this video. And if we go to extract API artifacts, not this one, probably in the configure API tools, go to configure API tools in Azure DevOps. If you scroll down, you should be able to see these variable names that we should be adding in our variable group. So I'm gonna copy it over service connection underscore name, and then I'm gonna put the service connection I'm just created, APIM connection. Then I'm going to copy API name for dev environment. And then I'm gonna go and copy the name of my dev APIM. And I will need to do the same for other environments. I need to put APIM underscore name underscore QA for QA environment. And let's go ahead and copy the name of QA APIM. And let's put it here. And let's add one more variable for prod APIM. But It's gonna be APIM underscore name underscore prod. And let's copy the name of our APIM prod environment. All right, now we need to provide resource group names for these three environments. So let's put it for dev environment first. Let's copy the resource group name from here and put it in this variable. And I need to do this 2 more times for QA environment and for prod environment. So let's go to our QA APIM and let's copy the resource group name. And let's put it in the QA resource group variable. And let's do the same with prod. Let's copy resource group name for prod APIM and let's put it in resource group name prod variable. Now, the last thing we need to specify here is the APIOps version. Let's copy this variable and put it here. And the version that we are going to be using, if you head back to Azure DevOps and go to tags, this is the version that we have downloaded. So this is the version we will be using and configure in our variable group. So I'm going to put v 4.1.3 and let's go ahead and save our changes. Now we have all set. Let's go ahead and create our pipeline. Let's create the extractor pipeline. So our code is in Azure repo, and let's select our APIM repo and select the existing Azure pipelines YAML files. And let's select the extractor YAML file. And let's go ahead with that. And let's save our pipeline. And let's go to pipelines and let's rename our pipeline. Let's call it extractor. And let's save our pipeline. And now let's get into the extractor pipeline and let's run our pipeline. Now I need to put the API management instance name for dev environment. So let's get back and copy the name of my APIM in dev environment. And I need to put the resource group as well for the APIM dev. And here I need to specify the Azure repo, which I'm going to be using for creating pull requests. I'm going to use APIM repo that we have just created. And I need to specify the folder where the artifacts will set. I'm going to use artifacts. And our target branch is going to stay main, and we are going to extract all. Let's go ahead and run our extractor pipeline. I need to get into the stage and view this request and permit the access to the variable group. However, we are going to get an error exactly because I haven't enabled the parallelism in our organization. So I need to go to my Azure DevOps org and configure or purchase some parallel jobs. If we go to the Azure DevOps organization and click on organization settings, then scroll down here until you see parallel jobs. Now let's go ahead and change the Microsoft hosted and self-hosted values. Let's set up some billing first with my Azure subscription. And let's go ahead with that. Now I need to put some paid parallel jobs. I'm gonna put 25 for both. And let's go ahead and save our changes. It's going to take a few minutes for this change to reflect And so I'm gonna pause my video until the API management instances are created as well. So we will get back and run our extractor pipeline again. Alright, now my APIM instances had been created for me, so let's go back and run our extractor pipeline one more time. Let's go ahead and run it. Alright, now my extractor pipeline is working. Alright, the first stage has been completed, but the second stage is failed while I tried to create a pull request. And let's see what's wrong here. As you can see here, we need to provide a generic contribute permission on the GitHub repo. So let's go to our repos and let's click on manage repos. Let's click on security. Let's select APIM build service and let's allow the contribution to GitHub repos. There are two more settings that we will need to allow, but I am gonna keep it until it flags some error in the pipeline because I want to show you that we are providing the least amount of permissions required in the pipelines. So now we have allowed the generic contribute in our GitHub repo. So let's go back and run the second stage. And the second stage failed again. So let's get in there and see what's wrong. And as you can see here, we need to allow permission to create branch. So let's get back and allow create branch for APIM build service. And let's get back and run our stage one more time. And we are going to see the last error. Alright, and the second stage failed again because of a missing pull request contribute permission. So let's get back, and this is the last thing we need to allow. So we need to allow contribute to pull requests, and create branch permissions for APIM build service. And let's go back and run the second stage one more time. Alright, we have one more error in our pull request. And as you can see here, it says there is another repo is pushing to the same reference. We are getting this error probably because we have been running or rerunning these attempts for this stage multiple times. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and to my pipelines and go to extractor and make a new run for my pipeline. So I'm gonna copy the name of my dev API management and then I'm gonna copy the resource group name of my dev API management. And then I'm gonna specify APIM and then artifacts. And let's go ahead and run a fresh run for our pipeline. Alright, the two stages of the pipeline has been completed. Now I want you to notice something. In the output of the first stage, we have artifacts. And this what's been exported from dev API management. So when we run our extractor pipeline, the extractor pulls out all of these information from dev API management. Then the extractor goes ahead and create a new pull request with this change, requesting to merge all of these artifacts into the main branch. So these are simply the files that we have just exported and they are ready to be added to our repo. But before I'm gonna go ahead and approve and merge these changes to the main branch, I need to set up the publisher pipeline first. So let's go back to pipelines and let's add a new pipeline. Let's go first and have a look at the publisher YAML files. So let's go to our repo, tools, pipelines, and run publisher.yaml. So this version that you have downloaded from GitHub has only two stages, which is pushing the changes to dev environment and pushing changes to prod environment. And as you might expected, we need to add one more stage to allow us to push our changes to QA environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and edit this file and copy the whole block of the push changes to prod stage. And I'm gonna add it here. And I'm gonna just change the name. Instead of prod, I'm gonna make it QA. So these are the changes I've done. I replaced all prod names into QA in the QA stage. And I'm going to leave a new version of publisher file with this change, with the new stage, in the resources of this video as well. So let's go ahead and commit our changes. Now let's go back into our pipeline creation and let's select our repo, existing YAML files, and let's choose run publisher.yaml. And let's go ahead with that. As you can see here, our changes has been reflected, and let's go ahead and save our pipeline. And let's go back to pipeline, select all, and let's rename our APIM pipeline and let's call it publisher. And let's save our changes. Now, let's get back to my pull request. And I'm gonna go ahead and approve it, and let's complete it by merging it to the main branch. And as soon as it's gonna be merged, the publisher pipeline is gonna be automatically kicked off to deploy our changes to all environments, dev, QA, and prod, in 3 separate stages. And the publisher pipeline is being kicked off. However, we are getting some errors, so let's get inside and see what's wrong. As you can see here, we need to install this tool from Visual Studio Marketplace. So I'm gonna go ahead and open Visual Studio Marketplace so we can install replace token as it's been highlighted here. We need to install replace tokens tool. So this is gonna be our tool, or if you wanna search for replace tokens, it's gonna be the one that we need to install. Make sure that you are choosing Azure DevOps on the top here. Now, let's select replace tokens and let's get it and install it in our Azure DevOps environment. Let's install it into my org. Alright, all set. Let's get back to my pipeline and let's run it one more time. And these are the 3 stages that I've talked about. Even though we have extracted these artifacts from dev environment, we are going to push our changes to dev environment first. And this is not a redundant work. We want to make sure that all of the environments stay the same at all times. And it's not enough to extract the artifacts from dev API management and push it straight to QA and prod. Maybe in an unlikely event, there are some odd things happened in a dev environment, which is gonna leave our dev environment different than QA and prod. That's why after we have extracted the artifacts from dev API management, we are going to push these artifacts into the same dev API management to ensure that all the environments had been deployed from the artifacts. And I need to get in here and approve or provide a permission to access APIM automation variable group. Alright, my dev deployment has been completed. And as you can see here, prior to QA and prod deployments, I will need to approve the deployment to these environments. If you remember, I added myself already as an approver on these two environments when we were creating environments under pipelines. So now we are deploying APIM in QA environments. But as you can see here, we are getting some errors. So let's get into the QA stage and see what's wrong. And if you scroll up a little bit, you'll be able to see that there is something is wrong here. There is an authorization failed error. And there is a GUID here that doesn't have authorization to perform the action on QA APIM. So let's copy this GUID and see what is it. Let's copy this GUID and go to Azure portal and let's search for this GUID. Probably we won't find any results, so let's go to Azure Active Directory and let's search for this GUID. And as you can see here, this is an enterprise application that's been created for me when I created my DevOps organization to allow the access between my DevOps org and my Azure subscription. And the error that we have got says that this user or this enterprise app doesn't have permission on this resource. So we are gonna go back to our subscriptions and allow this enterprise app to have an access to our subscription. So I'm gonna browse to my subscription, go to access control, and then I'm gonna add role assignment. I'm gonna choose contributor, go to the next step, and let's select the members, and then let's put my name. Or if you wanna go back to the Azure Active Directory and go to your enterprise app, you can copy the name of your app and put it in the subscription here to make sure that you are selecting the right app. And now let's go ahead and select it, and then let's assign this role. All right, now let's go back to our pipeline and let's rerun the QA deployment. Probably I will need to approve it one more time. Yes, let's review and approve. Now we have kicked off our QA deployment. All right, my QA deployment has been completed. I need to review and approve my prod deployment. And let's go ahead and allow my prod environment to access my variable group. And let's go ahead and approve the deployment. All right, now the prod deployment has been completed and we have all green for the 3 stages of our deployment: dev, QA, and prod. And that's not all. This is just a very simple setup for Azure pipelines for our API management. And in the next few videos, we are going to see more complex scenarios in using these pipelines. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.